Yo, brother, if you can give me about 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes of your life, I can guarantee you that by the end of this video, this thing will be completely gone from your life. If not, you won't feel like addicted to porn anymore, okay? So, the end of this video, you won't quote struggle with porn anymore. So just do yourself a favor. Just lock in till the end of this video. Remove all the distractions around you just for the next 20 or 30 minutes because this goes against everything you have been told your entire life. Okay, this goes against everything you have been told by these nofap coaches, by the nofap space, by the addiction experts, and by these self-improvement youtubers. This goes against everything. Okay, so I want you to just lock in for the next few minutes. So I want you to be very open to new thoughts and new perspective if you actually want to get the most out of this video. So I don't want to waste any more time. So let's first start by defining the word addiction, so you know exactly what we are going to debunk. So just for practicality, we will be using the following definition of addiction, which is most commonly used by the people, and this is what it is. So addiction is a disease or a disorder that causes compelled behavior, and the compulsion to engage with the object or behavior is greater than one's own free will to choose not to do it. Now, of course, in our stance, this definition is absolutely false, and this is totally rooted in mythology. I know this goes against everything you have been told about addiction, porn, and all that stuff. And most of you who are watching this video, you have been fed with so much misinformation, whether it's through the media, whether it's through these nofap coaches, whether it's through these self-improvement YouTube videos, whatever, whatsoever, okay? But Ahmed Jawad, my goal is to show you that this is not the case, and that you can move past these issues easily and no differently than you have moved past any other habit that you have solved in the past. No difference, right? And this is another thing that can muddy the whole water, is that, look, there is no single agreed upon definition for addiction. You can look for it. Even till this day, there is no single agreed upon definition for addiction. And the thing is, its definition is a constantly moving target, meaning that it keeps on changing. Because if you try to define it in different ways, you will either end up adding in certain activities, or eliminating certain activities out of that category based on the changing definition of addiction. Let me give you an example. Okay, for example, if you try to define addiction in this way, that an activity that you keep doing in spite of it having high costs or consequences, right? Like if you try to define addiction this way, that, oh, it is an activity that you keep on doing in spite of it having high costs or consequences, well then, there are many habits, many activities, and many behaviors that will fit into this category, including PMO, including overeating, driving a car, working late, using credit cards, owning a house, etc. Both, you, if you actually look for it, all of those activities and behaviors, all of these activities that are part of our daily life, right? And we always do those things, we always do these activities even though all of them have its own high costs and consequences, but still we do it anyway, and we don't, and people don't actually see those activities as addiction, right? So if you try to define addiction like in this way, that an activity you keep on doing in spite of it having high cost or consequences, well then, there are many habits and activities that also fit into this category based on this definition, right? Whether it's overeating, whether it's driving a car at high speeds, whether it's using credit cards, owning a house, working late, having a tough marriage, all of those things, because all of those activities has its own high costs and consequences, but still people do it anyway, right? And at the same time, if you try to narrow its definition, if you try to narrow the definition of addiction, like for example, like only those substances or activities that have measurable withdrawals, And also based on this definition, then there also comes certain drugs that might fall into this category, for example heroin. But there are some other drugs as well that might not fit into this category, for example cocaine, because cocaine has zero physical withdrawal symptoms, and yet using it can be massively problematic. So if you can look for it, we have already seen that if both widening and narrowing the definition of addiction has its own problems. Definition of addiction, it's a constantly moving target, right? There is no single agreed upon definition of addiction till now. Now the thing is, let's define addiction based on its old definition. So if we go back a few years ago, I'm talking about 100 years ago or maybe 200 years ago, right? This is the old definition of addiction. This is not this definition that we just mentioned, okay? I mean, people use this definition nowadays, but if we go back a few years ago, I'm talking about 100 years ago, addiction was simply meant that something, right, something that you would do passionately and excessively. So this is the old definition of addiction. This is what people used to define it back then. Something that you would do passionately and excessively. Now, if you carefully look at this definition, there is no mention of uh, like involuntary behavior or compulsion. There is no such words. The only words that are mentioned in this definition are passionately and excessively, meaning that something that you would do passionately, of course you actually enjoy doing it, it's your passion, you love doing it, and at the same time you do it excessively, repeatedly, over and over again, so much, right? So that's the old definition of addiction, something that you would do passionately and excessively. But what happened with the flourish of the treatment industry? I'm talking about in, I think, 20th century, when the treatment industry started to flourish, then people started to define addiction this way, okay? Like, this is what people actually use to define it nowadays. So there are three important components that people add in the definition of addiction, and I'm going to debunk all of the components one by one. So the first component that comes in the definition is that, oh, it's a behavior that you do even though you don't want to, or and you can't stop, like involuntary, it's an involuntary behavior. That's the first component. The second thing that people use to define addiction is that, oh, if you increase your usage or dosage with time, then that's an addiction. And the third component that comes is, oh, if you keep on doing socially unacceptable, quote socially unacceptable or riskier behavior time to time, over and over again, then that means that's an addiction. So I'm going to debunk all of these components one by one, so there is no confusion left. So the very first component that comes, that people use the most when they define addiction, is unable to stop. Oh, I can't stop this. Unable to stop. Now look, the real reason why you can't stop is not because of dopamine or brain rewiring, your brain being rewired, or neuroplasticity. No, but it's just that you have been told by the nofap or the society, meaning the people around you, that you should quit porn because of its consequences. So what happened, you have been told by the you have been told that you should quit porn because it's morally bad, it's wrong, it's disgusting, it's going to ruin your life, it's going to destroy your life, and it's morally bad. And there also comes the religious side of things as well. So you have been told all of those things, that you should quit porn because of its consequences. So what happens, you try to do it, you try to stop, you try to do it, but internally you are still wanting to watch porn because of the benefits. So the thing is, look, this is how it works, okay? You want, at the same time, you want to watch porn for the benefits, whether it's low, pleasure, stress relief, sexual relief, frustration relief, loneliness relief, But at the same time, you have been told by the nofap or the people around you, the society, that you should quit porn because of its consequences. And you know that, and there comes the religious side of things, and it's bad for you, you should stop, it's going to destroy your life, it's going to ruin your life. And you have been told all of those things. So there is the shame and guilt around it, right? But at the same time, you want to watch it before the benefits. So what is the best way to satisfy your desire? I mean, watch porn and get those benefits, quote benefits, but at the same time, you don't feel as much shame about it. So the best way that people use is that they can blame something else. They can blame the external factors. Like for example, you can, the people are able to blame the devil. Oh, I had no control over myself. Oh, it was the devil that triggered me to watch porn. I had no control. So what happens? And and they're able to blame addiction. Oh, I'm addicted, I have no control. Or they are able to blame something else. So when you are able to blame something else and you don't put that responsibility on yourself, what happens? It just removes that shame, it just makes you feel less shame about it. So what happened? You want to watch porn for the benefits, because of the benefits, but at the same time you have been told that it's bad, it's a taboo, it's morally wrong, you should quit, it's going to ruin your life. So you watch porn and then afterwards you blame something else to feel less shame about it. So when you are able to blame something else and when you don't put that blame on yourself, guess what happens? It just makes you feel less shame about it. So this is exactly what is happening, okay? And let me write one thing for you here, okay? Look, look, your internal want is always greater than your external motivation, right? Because externally you are told that you should quit porn, it's going to ruin your life, it's going to destroy your life, it's not, it's morally wrong, it's bad, it's a taboo, it's socially unacceptable. And there also comes the religious side of things as well. So those are the external reasons, the uh external motivation, okay, motivators, you can say. But internally you are still wanting to watch it for these amazing benefits that you see in porn, unconsciously, whether it's pleasure, stress relief, loneliness relief, emotional relief, pain relief, and all those things. So internally you are still wanting to watch porn, but externally you have been told that you it's bad or you should quit. So remember, internal motivators is always greater than external motivators. So that is why you watch it, because you want to watch it, and then afterwards you blame something else to feel as much less shame about it. Because here's the thing, if you can understand behavioral science, you might understand that we humans always act based on the perceived benefits. We humans are always motivated by the perceived benefits. So that's the first thing. And the second component that we are going to debunk, which is used by many people, is that, oh, if you increase your usage or dosage with time, then that's an addiction. Now this goes by both ways. For example, if you like something, then you, like for example, if I like playing football, right, then I can choose to do to play more of it, right? Like if you like something, then you can choose to do or consume more of it. Like if, like in the beginning, if I used to play football for like 30 minutes, in 3 years from now, 4 years from now, I might start playing it for like 3 hours straight. But you see, so, and not only that, but people usually increase their usage when they feel down, when they feel some kind of negative emotions. And you might have noticed this as well, that you don't watch porn when you feel very happy, like when you feel on top of the world, when you feel happy about life, and only when you feel down. And you only watch it when you feel down, when you feel some kind of negative emotions. That means that you're always looking for a fix, meaning that you're always looking for the benefits, the solution, right? So for people, porn is not like a video of two people having sex on a screen. For people, porn is a video of two people having sex on a screen, but it's like this, but it's like this miraculous drug, that takes away all of their problems. So at the same time, this is what is happening. Okay, people are, for people, you know porn is not like just a video of two people having sex on a screen. For people, porn is like this miraculous drug that takes away all of their problems. But at the same time, nofap makes it worse by telling you that, you will feel shame and guilt when you watch it. So what happens, you feel even more down after watching it, and then again you think that porn will make you feel better when you feel down. Guess what? It becomes an endless self-fulfilling cycle, right? And then the third component that we are going to debunk is that many people say this: oh, if you keep on doing something that is socially unacceptable, something that is a taboo in the society, something, a behavior that is quote riskier, like if you keep on doing a riskier behavior again and again, then that's an addiction. Now, look, let's just put the shame, guilt, morality aside. Okay, let's just put these things aside. I know we are religious, but I'm debunking this concept. Okay, so I want you to put the shame, guilt, morality aside. Just put those things aside, throw it out of the window, right? So if you just put the shame, guilt, morality aside, so if you like doing a certain behavior, if you like doing something, for example, looking at a naked woman, then you might choose to pursue it. You might choose to pursue it. But at the same time, your society will call it risky, and nofap will say that, it's wrong, it's bad. Whilst in reality, if we just put morality aside, you are the one, you choose to do that behavior based on certain reasons that we can easily debunk, right? So now let's compare porn to other habits. Look, okay, this is very important. Now, if we compare porn to other habits, because I used to ask this question multiple times back then when I was struggling with porn. So I kept on asking myself for years that why is it that people quit many other habits but not porn? Like, if I tell you myself, I remember I was fully able to leave video games, I was able to fully leave junk foods, I was able to fully leave some negative people from my life. But why porn was different? Why porn was different? So I realized one thing in my years and years of coaching. It's simply because with porn, we have been fed so many lies that actually became a self fulfilling prophecy. And when I use this word self fulfilling prophecy, it simply means that when you believe in something so strongly, it can become a subjective version. It can become your subjective version of the truth, meaning that it can become your reality, even though that is an illusion, right? Your mind can create an illusionary reality, if you can say. So that's what you call the self-fulfilling prophecy. When you believe in something so strongly, it becomes your reality. When in reality, if you actually look at it, in reality, porn is no different, no special than any other habit. All right. Now this is another point that I want to bring up in this video, because look, many people think that, oh, quitting porn is so hard and it's going to be a very, it's going to be a lifetime struggle, and it's like a quote battle that you have to fight. Like, what battle are you fighting? Look, freedom from porn is very very simple. Okay, because I've seen many people in my life, in fact I know many of them, that don't know anything about nofap, that have not bought that haven't bought into this nofap ideology, that don't even know about what is nofap. Okay, like these people, they don't have these concepts of addiction, withdrawals, self-image, neuroplasticity, dopamine, all of that. Okay, these people didn't even know about what is about nofap. Now, so these people, when they started watching porn, they started masturbating a couple of times in their teenage years, or maybe every single day. It really depends, because it's very subjective. So, when they used to watch porn, masturbate, in their teenage years, and then at certain point of their life, when in at certain point of their life, when they got into some kind of business, or maybe when they when they actually, maybe for their, maybe when they wanted to change because of faith reasons, or maybe for their own sake, and they actually wanted to change their life around, guess what? They decided to stop watching porn, stop masturbating. They decided to stop it, and they decided to left, leave behind porn and masturbation forever for the rest of their lives. And they simply, and they simply left it completely, and they never went back to it, and they simply went on in their lives. It was effortless from them. They simply decided to stop watching porn, and they left behind porn, masturbation forever, and and they never went back to it, and they simply went on in their lives. Why? It was effortless for them. Why wouldn't they quote struggle, right? And it's only because of one reason. It's simply because these people didn't have this concept of, oh, I'm addicted, oh, I'm gonna have withdrawals after I stop watching porn, or I'm gonna have these temptations and urges that goes against my own will. Oh, my brain is so damaged. None of that, okay? These people literally don't even know anything about nofap. And then the reason why I say, and this is one of my closest friend, okay, you can just read the what read what I have written, okay, because I don't want to make this video a little bit longer. Look, the thing is, what you need to understand, that, and the reason why I say that there are so many people like this in the society is because, and I want to bring up the point in the video, that the reason why I say there are so many people like this in our society is because we cannot see those people that are not in the nofap space. We cannot see those people that are not watching videos about how to quit porn or how to quit masturbation. We cannot see them, right? Why would they need to be in the nofap space if they have completely left behind porn and masturbation forever, and they simply went on in their lives? Why would they need to be in these nofap forums, in these communities? It doesn't make any sense, okay? And that is why I reason why I say there are so many people like this in the society, because we cannot see those people who are not watching nofap content, who are not in the nofap communities, who are not in the nofap space, right? So look, and here's a $1 million question, by the way, right? Just to make you more convinced. So here's a $1 million question. So if, let's say, if someone comes to you and he says to you that, hey, if you would not watch porn for another second for the rest of your life, you will get $1 million. And if, let's say, he's holding $1 million in his hands, okay, but he's saying that you will only get $1 million if you would not watch porn for another second for the rest of your life, then would you really end up watching porn because you are an addict, or you will lose control and watch it even though you don't want to? No, because humans have a choice. That means humans have free will. They have a choice, right? And not only that, plus also it would be effortless, from it would be so easy and effortless, because you see much more benefits in $1 million as compared to porn. All right, so let's just get into the this another part, okay? And by the way, I'm gonna throw up a few of the I'm gonna throw up some of the studies and research to make you even more convinced. And by the way, if you guys want all of the researches and studies regarding why addiction is untrue, right, you can message me on Instagram. I'm gonna give you all the references, all the researches, studies, and everything, okay? And you need to keep in your mind that there are mountains of researches and evidence that support my stance, that support my point, okay? There are tons of research and studies. So, and by the way, so I have put some of them in this document, because I don't want to make this video too much longer, because there's so many research and studies that prove that support my stance. So here's the scientific proof on why addiction is unreal. So new thoughts and new perspective are required in order to quit porn and masturbation forever. Now, in order to understand the illusion behind quote quote addictions, let's first understand first the substances that were considered quote quote addictions. And what are those? Drugs and alcohol. Because, and why I'm talking about drugs and alcohol, because these substances were first considered as quote quote addictions. So it's really important to take these substances first, right? And not only that, but drugs and alcohol is literally something that we ingest into our body. But when it comes to porn is literally a screen. It's not something that we ingest into our body. So that's the difference. Now here's the first study on quote quote alcoholics. This was a study that was done on quote quote alcoholics. So in a research study, participants went through a test, they went through an experiment to assess how strongly they believed in different concepts of addiction, such as loss of control, genetics, and impulsions or cravings. And the study simply showed that those people who believed most strongly in addiction were most likely to relapse following treatment. In fact, this was one of the most top predictors of relapses in these groups. People who believed most strongly in addiction, they were most likely to relapse in the following treatment. And this was one of the most top predictors in these groups. And by the way, here's another study. I've given references as well. And there's another study which is about binge and relapse study, I call it. So here's a groundbreaking study where they simply did a comparison between those people who were exposed to the treatment ideology, which is of course the addiction ideology, and those people who are exposed to a more choice based view. And the study showed that the binge drinking rate in the first group, meaning who had the treatment ideology, addiction ideology, the binge drinking rate in the first group was 9 times higher than that in the second group, in which people believed in the more choice based view. 9 times higher. And there's another study that also the same study that also showed that the group who went through the treatment ideology, who believed in the addiction ideology, they also exhibited a binge rate of 5 times higher binge rate compared to the group who received no treatment at all. And this is Bransama 1980. All right. So just from this one study, we can clearly see that it's really about our beliefs at the end of the day. It's really about the beliefs, right? And by the way, I've quoted some of another studies. Okay, some of the quick researches. So here's one another prolific drug researcher, and he noted that and Reiner in 2005. So he simply noted that conversely, those cultures in which people, let me even zoom it as well, okay, so it's easier for you. So here's one another prolific drug researcher that noted that conversely, those cultures in which people do not believe that drugs can cause the loss of control, they experience very little of it, meaning they experience very little loss of control. You see, this is you see, so it really shows that it's really about your beliefs at the end of the day. And here's another very popular statistic that was thrown around by the Recovery Society, which simply says that only 1 in 10 addicts get the treatment they need. And by the way, this statistic is thrown by the Recovery Society itself, and that says that only one only 1 in 10 addicts, they get the treatment they need. Now, depending on this data that you look at, these numbers are very accurate. Like, it shows that if only 1 in 10 addicts get the treatment they need, that it shows that only 10 to 20% of the Americans who have ever fit into the diagnosis of addiction, they get formal help, whether it's in the form of treatment, in the form of support group attendance, or the combination of both. Now, if you can see, the rest never even get any formal help, never get any treatment at all. Now the question that comes here is that, then what happens to the rest 80 to 90% of the people who don't get any treatment? Like, are those people dying? After all, recovery ideology says that you can't quit an quote quote addiction without treatment. So that means those 80 to 90% of the people must be dying. But that's not the case. In fact, those people are not dying. But the most craziest part is that they're getting over their problems at a rate that is either equal or maybe better than for those who receive treatment. And to prove this, here's the statistic as well that I've thrown here to make you understand. Okay, let me zoom it out a little bit. So if you can actually understand this pie chart, you can understand a lot of things. Okay, let me put it further away. Yeah. So look, and by the way, this is the statistic about treated versus untreated alcoholics in any SARC NISARC. So this is the comparison in pie chart between those people who received treatment and those people who received no treatment at all. So if you can actually look for it, the light green color is the light green color in the pie chart shows those people who are still quote quote dependent, and the dark green color shows those people who are no longer quote quote dependent, right? So if you can look for the people who receive treatment, you know, almost like 28% of them are still quote quote dependent, still we can say quote quote addicted whatsoever. Okay, and the dark green, and 72% of them who receive treatment, they are no longer quote quote dependent. But if you actually look for the people that received no treatment at all, if you carefully look, this one is slightly almost equal to this or slightly better success rate as compared to the people who receive treatment. Like 24% of them are still quote quote dependent who receive no treatment, and 76% of them, which is even slightly larger than the this one, they are no longer quote quote dependent. One group has received treatment and the other group has received no treatment at all. And yet the recovery society and yet the recovery ideology says that you can't quit an quote quote addiction without treatment. But here the studies are showing the opposite. All right. Now here's another study that was done on Vietnam vets who were diagnosed as quote quote heroin dependent. They simply found that within the first 3 years, about 88% of them quit without any relapses, without any relapse. And in a 24-year long follow up study, it showed that 96% of them had eventually resolved their problems on their own. And you should also keep in your mind that only 2% of those vets, out of this, only 2% of those vets received treatment. Robbins 1993. And this is another study that can give you all many of the answers, right? You see, only 2% of them received treatment, yet 96% of them had eventually resolved their problems on their own, usually without any treatment. And this is another extremely important fact about the Vietnam vet heroin, quote quote, heroin addicts, is that while the overall relapse rate before was a mere like about 20, like while the overall relapse rate was merely about 12%, but those vets who were shuffled into the treatment, who received treatment, they ended up having a staggering 67% of the relapse rate. That's even more than 5 times worse. So while the recovery society moans and groans that only 1 in 10 gets the treatment they need, if we look, and study shows that more than 9 in 10 more than 9 in 10 resolve their problems, usually without treatment. And there are many cases as well where treatment leads to worse outcomes, like this one. So, and here's the recovery trap you have been fallen into. Okay, here's the recovery trap, by the way. Let me remove this one. Okay, so the idea that anyone needs addiction treatment, this idea that anyone needs quote quote addiction treatment, is pure misinformation, right? Because it hurts people by making them convinced that they are powerless and they are helpless, and thus taking away their motivation to try to change. Not only that, but the recovery society also labels heavy substance use as quote quote addiction, and they define it as a state of involuntary behavior caused by some disease, while in reality heavy substance use is an activity that people have learned to prefer. They have learned to like it, meaning that at first you don't like it, right? But as time goes on, you start to experience the quote benefits, and then you come to this conclusion that, oh, this thing is amazing, and then you build a preference for it, and then you simply learn to like it. So it's a learned preference, it's a cultivated preference. But what happens when people learn to view this preference, not an addiction, when people learn to view this preference as some quote addiction, then it simply adds a layer of confusion that blocks them from evaluating the reasons behind their preference, and it makes it even harder for them. It makes it harder for them to change, should they choose to. And the reason is very simple, okay? It's simply because these people are simply struggling to fight something that does not even exist. And what is it? A bogeyman of addiction. They are simply trying to recover from a disease that does not even exist. They are trying to recover from a non existent disease. And you have to keep, and look, the Recovery Society is the one that invented the concept of addiction. They are the one who invented it, promoted it, and they own it. And also, not only that, but you can't even mention addiction without implying involuntary, unchosen behavior. So they created this bogeyman called addiction, that somehow that has a mind of its own, that robs you of the power of choice and forces you to PMO against your own will. Now, with this concept, they created this idea that something is to be treated, something is to be fight, and something is to recover from. While in reality, there is nothing to be treated, nothing to fight at, or nothing to recover from. There are only personal choices to be made. That's it. And here's the truth, okay? Here's the truth about PMO. Look, your PMO, porn, masturbation, orgasm, your PMO use is not involuntary. It's not involuntary. It's not out of control. In fact, you are the one who voluntarily choose it, because for better or worse, you prefer it. I mean, you still prefer it, you like it. So you voluntarily choose to PMO based on certain reasons which we can easily debunk, and I've debunked it already in my channel. There are a lot of videos about it. For example, I have a video about debunking pleasure. I have a video about debunking, yeah, forget about it, we are going to talk about it later, okay? So look, you could try to recover by avoiding triggers and working on alternative coping mechanisms, is if it is all you want. But look, you can do those things, but if you still prefer using PMO, if you still prefer using porn for the perceived benefits, then you will find yourself wanting to do it, and you will do it anyway. So these things are absolutely useless. All right. Now, another point that comes, another very important component that people talk about while defining addiction is the brain changes, right? And to explain this, they used this very popular image that is popping around the internet nowadays. And this very popular image that says, oh, here's your normal brain, here's your brain on heroin, and here's your brain on porn. And it's so sad to see that these people who actually look at this image, they just believe it without even questioning it. It's so sad, and sadly, people who actually look at this image, they are like, oh, so oh, that is why I cannot stop watching porn. It's because my brain is so damaged, my brain is so fucked up, right? So you see, and and sadly, these people, it's like saying, it's just like saying that, oh, look, I don't have any knowledge about this, but look, that's true. So those people who actually believe in this image, I want to ask you one question. I want to ask you a very simple question. Can you tell me what is the purple part of this brain region represents, and what is the blue part of this brain region represents? Like, what is the purple part of this brain region represents, and what is the blue part of this region showing? What does that represents? Do you even know what does that mean? What does that shows? No, it's like saying that, oh, look, I don't have any knowledge about this, but yeah, that's true. Oh, I believe in it, even though I have zero knowledge about it. So people started to believe it. People literally believe in that without even questioning it, and that's so sad to see. Sadly, even the most intelligent of the people, they actually fall for this trap. Now this image is pure bullshit. Okay, this is pure bullshit. Okay, this is not, this is something that I don't know whoever put this image on, but people almost like 99% of the people actually believed in this image, if I'm not wrong. Now look, yes, your brain changes when you watch porn repeatedly over and over again. But here's the truth, okay? Brain changes occurs in the formation of any habits or skills in order to create. Look, brain changes occurs in the formation of any habits or skills in order to create less resistance to do it over and over again. Yes, your brain changes, but why your brain changes? In order to remove that resistance. Remove that resistance so that it's easier for you to do that behavior over and over again. But those brain changes, they cannot force you to do, like they cannot force you to do it again, or also create this weird powerful cravings. No, it's just that to make it easier for you to do that behavior over and over again, it just removes that resistance towards it. And to explain this, I will give you a very simple example of your own. Okay, so remember the first time when you learned to drive a bicycle. Like at first when you were learning to drive a bicycle, you see there was a lot of resistance. You were like, oh, should I drive it, should I not drive it? There was basically a kind of fear in your mind as well, that, oh, what if I fall down, what if I get injured, you know oh, what if I paddle it wrong and I would fall down. So yes, there was a lot of resistance towards it. Why? Because it was new to you. That activity was new to you. But as time goes on, as time went on, you keep on practicing to drive it. What happened? Now you don't need to think much before doing it. It's simply because your brain changed in order to adapt, to make it easier to do that behavior again and again. All right, so I've used these two pictures to explain this. This is the picture of a person who plays a piano, who is basically a pianist. Okay, and this is the picture of the brain, like this is the brain scan of a person who drives taxi in London. Again, this takes us to another point. Okay, I want to ask you, is both of these images the same as this one? No. You see, this is absolutely bullshit, guys. This is bullshit. Okay, so if you actually look at this image, the one image is about a person who plays piano, like a pianist, and the other image is about a person who drives taxi in London. Now you see, like any habit, now you might, people who now you might see this image and you're like, oh yeah, his brain has changed slightly. Yeah, it's changed, but it's not like the one that is represented in this picture. Like the whole structure is changed. Man, bullshit. All right, so look, like any habit or skills that we repeat, yes, often our brain changes, not because of dopamine, but just to make it easier to do that behavior over and over again. Now, do you understand? And this is very important. So, the pianist or the taxi driver, they are not forced to play the piano or drive the taxi or create powerful cravings to do it. It's just easier for them to do the behavior without much thinking. And it's the same thing with porn. It's the same thing with porn, okay? And think about it, okay? If our brain would not change no matter what, then we won't be able to learn any new skill. We won't be able to develop any new habit, because our brain has to change in order for us to develop habits, in order for us to make our lives easier. Because if, let's say, our brain would not change no matter what, then even if you learn to drive a car, you know even after 3 years, even after 4 years of driving your car, there would be the same level of resistance. There would be the same level of fear in your mind. You will have to think everything. You will have to think so much before driving your car. I mean, oh, what gear I have to put on, what key I have to press. You have to think so much before doing it. Why? Because your brain hasn't changed. So it's really important for our brain to change in order for us to learn new skills, in order for us to develop new habits. Porn is not special, right? any habit or skill that you repeat, your brain changes, not to force you to do it again, but just to make it easier to do it over and over again. It just removes that resistance towards it. But those brain changes, they cannot force you, or they cannot create weird powerful cravings to do it. Not only that, but there are mountains of evidences and researches that have proved time to time that people usually completely remove their quote quote addictions completely with time. And that does not make any sense. Like, if people usually completely remove their quote quote addictions with time, like, addiction implies that it's an unchosen behavior, like you are not the one choosing to do it, and it's not under your free will, like it's an involuntary behavior. So how is that possible that people completely remove their quote quote addictions with time? So that means that it's under their free will. They're choosing. They have a choice, right? If addiction was real, then it's not possible that people usually completely remove their quote quote addictions with time. And by the way, there is another study that was done for about the people who drink alcohol. Okay, so quote quote alcoholics, even though we should not say them alcoholics, because alcoholics, yeah, that takes us to another point. I will make a separate video on it. Okay, I know there are a lot of information coming in my mind, but because the time is short and I have to cover many things in this video, let me be very quick. Okay, so look, there was one study that was done on alcohol, in which the study showed that, the research showed that people usually completely remove, like people usually, like the typical lifespan of alcohol quote quote addiction is about like 5 years. Like, even though I don't believe in addiction, but if, let's say, if it was real, then people, then it only lasts for about 5 years. And after 5 years, people usually completely reduce or completely remove their quote quote addictions with time, and they move on in their lives. So how is that possible? If addiction implies that it's an involuntary or unchosen behavior, then it doesn't make any sense. And this is another important thing. Okay, look, even if your brain was truly messed up, even if, let's say, your brain was truly messed up, like the one that is showed in this picture. Okay, even if your brain was truly messed up, then then the mind is always stronger than the brain chemistry. And understand and keep in your mind that the mind and the brain is not the same thing. Your brain is the physical organ that is present inside your head, in your it's that this is the physical organ, which is your brain. That's physical structure, right? And that is completely lifeless. I mean, it does not have emotions, it does not have motive, it does not have beliefs. All of that is in your mind, all of that is in your mind. Okay, so the best example to explain this is, like, why the mind is always stronger than the brain chemistry. Now, the best example I can give you is, let's say, imagine, like, for example, when you are at the gym, and remember when you keep, when you do very hard reps, you know and when you keep on doing very hard reps when you are working out at the gym, and you're doing very hard reps, and suddenly your brain gives you the signals that you should stop, and it hurts. But even though, you still push yourself to do even more reps. So what does that show? Is that you are always stronger than the brain chemistry. You're always stronger than your own brain chemistry. Now let's talk about why we actually watch porn, right? Like, what if we like if you have understood that it's not some disease, it's not some involuntary behavior. So the question comes is, why we actually watch porn? Now look, the real reason why you watch it is because of the benefits, right? It's simply that you want to watch it. You want to watch it for the benefits. And if we take a look at the definition of want, what is the definition of want? Want is the emotion that is associated with the perceived benefits. Now, just like, for example, look, like, you might want an ice cream, you might want a mango juice, right? You might want a mango juice because you think that it tastes good, it gives you pleasure, and some relaxing effect. So those are the benefits that you perceive in it. Just like that, you might want porn because you think it will provide pleasure, stress relief, sexual relief, etc. So those are the benefits that you perceive. No difference, okay? And to explain this further, I'm going to use this example, okay? So you see, this is the picture of a guy, that what it shows, this is a picture of a guy who's like, whatever, he's like thinking about all of the stressful thoughts. Maybe like this guy, he just had a loss in his business, and he's thinking about all this financial stress, and stress about his family, stress, different, work stress. He's basically thinking about all those stressful thoughts whatsoever, okay? Now, if you see that this guy does not crave porn at all when he feels very good, when he feels on top of the world, when he feels very happy about life, but then something bad happened in his life, and then he becomes like very, very stressed. So now he wants or craves porn because he perceives porn to give him stress relief. It's really that simple, okay? So, and this is another guy, okay? And this is John, by the way. So John, you see, John, just like this, John does not craves going to the fishing throughout the day, 24/7. It does not craves going to the fishing throughout the day. And yes, John, yes, he, of course, he loves going to fishing. He really enjoys going to fishing, but he does not craves going to the fishing throughout the day. But when he becomes stressed, so now he wants or craves fishing because he perceives fishing to give him stress relief. Now, you would not call it an urge to go for fishing. Instead, it's simply a want. It's simply what John wants to do when he becomes stressed, because he thinks, he believes, he perceives fishing to give him stress relief, to relieve his stress, right? So, look, you create the quote quote urge because of the benefits that you perceive that PMO would give, to you. But you need to understand, this is very important, that there is no difference between an urge and a want. Both of them are the same things, okay? And let's not even use the word urge for it, because uh the right word for it is the want, okay? Like, you want to do it, right? Now, and then the question comes is, many people say that, all right, then why do you have urges? Like, why do we have urges? Now, what you need to understand, that, and also, you see, so what it shows, that you don't watch porn when you feel very happy, when you feel on top of the world, and you only watch it when you feel down. So that means that you're always looking for a fix, you're always looking for the benefits, right? Now, why do we have urges? You see, an urge is not biological, it's not rooted inside of our body. But of course, we do have a sexual hardware in our brain, the same way we have a hardware for fear in our brain. But do you understand that we don't feel fear out of nowhere? Like, if I'm walking around the room, I start feeling fear out of nowhere. No, that's not the case. We only feel fear when we see something, and that we reason it to be as, fearful, as scary. Just like that, we don't get forced to have urges out of nowhere. We have urges if we see a woman, and then we reason if we want to activate our sexual hardware, and if we want to pursue her or not, whether it's through porn or whether it's in real life. So you need to understand that you don't just see a piece of body, literally a skin color, literally a skin color, a body, and then your own body creates urges, and now you don't have control over your own body. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous, right? Now, look, we always choose to watch porn. You are the one always choosing to watch porn the whole damn time. You always choose to watch it for the benefits, for the perceived benefits. Now, let's be honest, okay? I want you to ask yourself these questions. You got to ask yourself these questions. Number one, look, so why some people that watch porn, that masturbate once in their lives, and they never do it again? And also, why some people do it once a week, and then they decide, you know what, enough is enough, and they just stop? And also, why some people do it 7 times in a row and then they decide enough and then they stop. And also, why some people have watched porn or masturbated a couple of times, like I told you, I've given you the example as well. So why some people have watched porn or masturbated a couple of times in their lives, and then when they wanted to change their life, they left it behind forever and they never went back to it. And also, why some have never even watched porn or masturbated in their entire lives and never even feel like doing it. Right now, the question that you should be asking here is that, if addiction was real, then every one of them, like literally every one of them, would be doing it uncontrollably 24/7. Like all of them would be struggling the same. Like literally the people with the same age, the people having the same exact brain, I mean this, the people, the same humans. Why is that they all are not struggling the same? All of them are, are not doing it uncontrollably 24/7. Like you see some people do it once a week and then they decide enough is enough and they just stop. They just choose to stop and then not, and they don't do it again. Whilst why some other people do it 7 times in a row, 5 times in a row, 4 times in a row, and then they decide enough is enough and they just stop. They just choose to stop the moment when they think that, oh, they are satisfied. And why some other people have watched porn or masturbated a couple of times and then they left it behind forever and they never went back to it. So if addiction was real, then why is it's not that all of them would be struggling this, all of them are not struggling the same. But that's not the case. Why? Because everyone have a choice. Everyone have a choice. Got it? Now, and then there comes another argument that people make here is that, Ahmed, why do I have urges even without seeing a woman? Now look, you need to understand that urges exist in the mind, not in the body. It's not like a bodily sensation unless if you make it out to be. But other than that, urges only exist in your mind. And also your balls or your body, it cannot create thoughts inside your mind. Nor it can also not change the content of your thoughts as well. That's impossible. In fact, you are the one, you create the thoughts based on certain beliefs, based on certain reasons. And here are some of those beliefs that the nofap or the internet have instilled inside of us. Number one, and here are some of the common beliefs that the nofap and media placed upon you, instilled inside of us, that, oh, if you don't think sexually, it means, then that means something is wrong with your libido. Oh, if you don't have so many urges, if you don't have so much urges, it means something is wrong with your testosterone, something is wrong with your masculinity. And here's the reasoning that people have. Oh, I don't want something to be wrong with my libido, to be wrong with my masculinity, so let me create the urges so I can feel better. The benefits. Got it? Right? So, and here's another normal thought process that people have about it, okay? So this is a very common myth, very common misconception that people have. They believe that reproduction is a survival need. I mean, people literally believe that reproduction is somehow a biological desire to survive, and you cannot live without it. Now, if you can see, I pasted two pictures here. One is the picture of a couple who don't even have any kid. I mean, they're alone, they don't have any kid. And there's another picture of a couple who have so many kids. Now, my the point the point is that this couple chose to not have kids. This couple chose to not have kids until they die, and yet that does not mean that they die. They are not surviving. They die eventually. No, I mean they are still living their lives freely. But people choose not to do it and don't even feel the urge to do it as well. I'm not saying this couple does not have sex. Of course they probably have sex, they might have sex, but they choose to not have kids until they die. Yet this another couple that you can see on the picture, they have so many kids because they simply choose to have kids, right? They simply choose. So what it shows that if I actually correct this statement that reproduction is a biological desire to survive, now the correct statement would be desire. This is the correct statement for it, okay? Reproduction is not a biological desire to survive. It's simply our choice. It's simply our desire. It's simply what we want to do, but it's not a survival need at all. Because there are many other examples, like for example you can look at so many priests. Like there are so many peoples, like for example priests and people like priests and asexuals. These guys never even indulge in any sexual activity for like their whole life. They don't even have sex for like their whole life. So does that mean that they die? No, that's not the case. So reproduction is not a survival need. It's simply our choice. It's simply the desire. It's simply what you want to do, but it's not a survival need at all. Like reproduction is not like hunger. It's not like hunger, because when we feel hungry, of course that's a biological desire to survive. Our body, like when we feel hungry, even if let's say you're in the middle of a boxing match, even if let's say you're in the middle of a fight, you're in the middle of a business meeting, and you're busy 24/7, your body, of course your body will crave for food, right? No matter what. It's because hunger is a biological desire to survive, but reproduction is not like hunger. Because if let's say you're in the middle of a business meeting, you're in the middle of a boxing match, you won't think about having sex with a woman, or watching porn, masturbating, reproduction and all that stuff. So reproduction is not like hunger, right? And I want to make this video quick, okay? So see, there are two pictures. One is the picture of a prostitute and the other one is the gym, okay? Now if you were to given the options of choosing between paying a prostitute and going to the gym, honestly what would you choose? Like most of you would might choose going to the gym over paying a prostitute. Why? Because it's your choice. You see perceived benefits in gym and you see no value in paying a prostitute, while some other people, they might choose this option rather than going to the gym. Why? Because all of them have their own perceived benefits and they have a choice. They can choose. And this is another picture, okay? One is the picture of junk foods and the other one is the picture of healthy foods. So there is no rocket science that the person who is a healthy food enthusiast, he will choose the option of eating healthy foods rather than junk foods. And while some other guy, who loves eating junk food and does not even like eating healthy foods, he might choose this option. And you also know that you don't even have you don't even feel like doing doing these things most of the time, okay? All of it depends on your own perception about these things and the benefits you think it will give to you, right? Like for example, the benefits that the guy who chose to who chose to eat healthy foods instead of junk foods, the guy who chose the option of eating healthy foods, the benefits that he perceives in it is that, oh, it's gonna make me more healthy, I'm gonna be able to live more longer, it's gonna help me to build more muscles, it's gonna help me attract more women, it's gonna help me be more physically fit. Like whatever, those are the perceived benefits, and based on those perceived benefits you might choose to eat healthy foods. While some other guy who chose to eat junk foods, he sees perceived benefits in eating junk foods. Benefits like, oh, this, this Big Mac, oh, this Big Mac, oh, it gives me the sensation that nothing can be compared of, it gives me so much pleasure, and it tastes so good and all of that, you know and the same thing happens with paying a prostitute and going to the gym. The person who might choose this option, he perceives benefits in this option. He's like, oh, going to the gym, oh, it's gonna make me more muscular, I'm gonna be able to build more muscles, I'm gonna be able to look more masculine, I'm gonna be able to attract more women, I'm gonna look more healthy, I'm gonna look good look, I'm gonna be look more attractive. Whilst the person who has chose the option of paying a prostitute, he might have his own perceived benefits. He's like, oh, it's going to give me pleasure, all of those things. So you see, all of it depends on your own perception about these things and the benefits you think it will give to you. Now there's another very interesting story that I want to add up here is Japan and antidepressants in 1990. Now look, Japan and antidepressants in 1990. This is a very interesting story, by the way. Japan and antidepressants in 1990. Again, this is a very popular story, and by the way, this is a real life example I'm giving you. So in 1990, back then, Japan in 1990, basically, the people of Japan, they didn't have this thing called depression, right? Like the thing is, the even like they if even if they do have it, they just saw it as ups and downs of life. They just saw it as, oh, it's a part of life. If you have ups and downs, that's life. They didn't saw it as some kind of mental illness called depression. So not only that, but also, even if someone was depressed, they just saw it as, oh, this guy's probably mentally ill. And that's was just like 0.1%, like stuff like that, okay. Other than that, the people of Japan didn't believe that they have this thing called depression. And because they didn't have, they didn't have this, uh, they didn't believe that they have a thing called depression, then the common sense we can use here is that, how can you buy antidepressants if you don't think that you have depression? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? So, and by the way, you can link that to multiple cases as well, whether it's porn, whether it's alcohol, whether it's nofap, whether it's anything, okay. Now look, so what they had to do, I'm talking about the pharmaceutical industry. They had a lot of interest because, in 1940s, 1970s, and 19, this was the time basically where people were living in the toughest condition. That was the time of World War One, World War Two, and all that stuff. And because of that, the people were, they were very quote depressed, but they didn't believe that they have this mental illness called depression. They didn't believe that. They just saw it as ups and downs of life. That's it. They just saw it as a tough time that will go away eventually. So now you see, just like every other business model, how every business model works. They find a problem and then they sell a solution to that problem. That's how every business model works. Now, yeah, might get, the thing is, the pharmaceutical industry, they had a lot of interest in this specific problem of the people, you know and because of that, they wanted to sell a solution to their quote problems, even though the people of Japan didn't believe they have this problem, okay. So what they had to do is, they had to make people think that they have this thing called depression. So for that purpose, they actually used a Japanese concept. So they actually used, basically they used this word soul. They used the word soul in Japanese, and they said that, oh, your soul could catch a cold. They said that in Japanese, right? And that simply means that your soul can catch a thing called depression, and now you're kind of stuck in it, and you cannot do anything about it. So to make it even more real, what they did is they actually started to make learned connections. And if you don't know what learned connections is, learned connections means that when you connect two things with each other, even though both of them have zero correlation, that's what we call learned connections, okay. Just like for example, you know people who just like for example, when people connect trauma with porn, when people have say that, oh, childhood trauma leads to the desire to watch porn. So when people connect trauma to porn, that's a learned connection, okay. Because I've proved that that's not the case, okay. Childhood trauma has zero correlation with your desire to watch porn, right? And there are many studies that I've showed as well. I will make a separate video on it. But just understand that there are so many people in this world that had lived the worst childhood ever, but still they don't feel like they had to watch porn or masturbate or drink alcohol or whatever the stuff, okay. Now look, so what they did is they simply told them that, oh, whenever you feel something bad, like highs and lows of life, then that's a sign you have depression. That's a sign you have depression. Oh, if you feel like this, that's a sign you have depression. Or if you feel like that, that's a sign you have depression. Oh, if you feel angry sometimes even though you don't want to, that's a sign you have depression. So they started doing this marketing all over Japan, spreading this message inside of people's head that, oh, if you feel like this, that's a sign you have depression. And just because everyone believes in the same belief does not mean that it's an objective truth, okay? And not only that, but they also used the authority figures for this purpose. The experts were saying that, oh, if you feel like this, that's a sign you have depression. If you feel like that, that's a sign you have depression. Now, after doing all of this marketing all over Japan, guess what happened? Guess what happened? Like, not instantly after that, but time to time, after they have been doing all of this marketing all over Japan, in 1990, Japan became one of the most popular country when it comes to antidepressants use. That's most crazy, okay? Because now people started to believe that they have this thing called, now people started to become aware, more and more aware of this thing called depression. And now, because they've started to become aware of a non-existent thing called depression, now they actually look for the solution, okay? Because they have got told that, oh, it's something that your soul could catch a cold, and now you're stuck with it, and now it's going to ruin your life. You have to do something about it, or else it's going to ruin your life completely. So then these people are like, oh, because the expert is saying, right? Oh, that expert, that authority figure is saying that, oh, oh, let me see if I have this thing called depression or not. And then when they experience the quote uh, the symptom, then they actually look for, oh, let me go and buy the antidepressants. Boom, Japan became one of the most popular country when it comes to antidepressants use. Like, before, the people of Japan, literally, Japan was the only civilized country where people were not quote depressed, right? They just saw it as ups and downs of life. Japan was the only civilized country where people didn't believe that they have this thing called depression. But after doing all of this marketing all over Japan, people actually started believing that they have this thing called depression. And the antidepressant sales, it boosts, and it went so much up, because of course that's how every business model works. And you can link that to the nofap space, you can link that to the recovery society, how they actually sell their treatment programs to people. What do you think? They created this bogeyman of addiction, to make people feel helpless, to make people feel powerless, so that they submit themselves to these guys, and they can sell whatever the stuff they have. They can sell whatever the stuff they have to people, okay? That's literally how every business model works. And it can only become a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the people of Japan started to believe in this in this concept of depression so strongly. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy. They actually started to feel like they were depressed even though they were not, right? Now, here's the house versus apartment, the last thing I will explain. House versus apartment choice, a very good example, okay? Now look, I want to ask you one thing, okay? If all of you had the money, like, if you had the money, right, if you had a lot of money, right, to buy one of these, if you had the money, which one would you choose? A big house or an apartment? Now, of course, most people will choose the big house over an apartment, but the thing is, there are certain costs or downsides of buying a big house. And what are those? The big house has higher property taxes, it has higher price, it has heat and conditioners to pay, and it requires more physical and mental energy to maintain it. And there is 30 years of big mortgage, and also you are probably locked in one location for the rest of your life. So that's the cost of buying a big house. Now, if we compare that to an apartment, then there are much less costs of buying an apartment as compared to a big house. So there is pretty much small monthly rent, there are no property taxes, there is nothing much to maintain, no extra rooms. If something goes wrong, you don't have to take care of it. You don't need as much time, effort, and mental energy. There is no insurance or liability to worry about. You don't have to worry about the property value decreasing. So you see, there are much less costs of buying an apartment as compared to buying a big house. Now if you look at the house versus apartment choice, right, because it's a choice. If you look at house versus apartment choice that people make, the same way that nofap looks at people who watch porn, then everyone would be saying that, oh, this guy is probably mentally weak, oh, he's probably traumatized, oh, he has a self-destructing behavior, he's probably self-sabotaging, oh, he must have these underlying issues such as stress, depression and anxiety. But you see, people don't say that. People don't say to those people who choose to buy a big house over an apartment, even though the big house has so many costs and downsides as compared to an apartment, but people still choose to buy a big house. So if people were to look at house versus apartment choice the same way the nofap looks at people watching porn, then those people would also be saying that, oh, he's probably mentally weak, he's self-destructing, he's self-sabotaging, he's probably have underlying issues such as depression, stress and anxiety. But people don't say that. Why? Because humans always choose what gives them the most benefit in their mind. And what are the benefits that people see in buying a big house? These are some of the benefits I have written, okay? So, oh, people will come to their house more, it makes them feel better, oh, it elevates their status, oh, it makes them feel comfortable in a place they can call home. So you see, these are all the benefits. So as long as there are benefits in something, then people are always willing to choose to pay the associated costs in order to get those benefits. Just like watching porn, okay, as long as there is benefits in watching porn, people are always willing to choose to pay the associated costs in order to get those benefits to watch porn. All right, now to end this video, I'm going to end this with a very simple message, okay? Now look, this is how it works, okay? All you need to do is, if you have debunked this concept of addiction completely, now all you need to do is simply that you need to see more value in not watching porn as compared to watching porn, right? Because that's how if you that's how it will work, okay? Like if you have completely debunked the value in it, right? If you actually, my purpose to make these videos, why I make these videos about debunking in depth, is because the purpose is, why I make these videos about debunking in depth, so that you can actually completely devalue, you can actually completely debunk the value that you see in porn, right? And so that you can actually see more value in not watching porn. This is what you need to do, okay? You need to see more value in not watching porn as compared to watching porn. So this is how it works, okay? There is the value in watching porn, and then there's the value in not watching porn, right? Now most people, what they try to do is, even though they try to debunk 100% of the value in porn, but I mean, if we see realistically, that's not possible, okay? Because if you have debunked like 97 or 95% of the value in it, then that's a good thing, okay? And if there's like 3 or 5% or 1% of the value that is left, just because of that 1%, you don't need to go back to it again, okay? Like, you see, you got my point. So just to make it extreme, let's say that you see zero benefits in watching porn, right? Or zero benefits or zero value, we can say, okay? Zero value in watching porn, and in not watching porn you see like 1,000 benefits in not watching porn, or we can say 1,000 benefits or 1,000 value, or 10,000 benefits or 20,000 benefits, 20,000 value, depends, right? So this is how it works, okay? You need to see like zero benefits, not like almost like zero benefits, but very less value in watching porn, and you need to see way more value in not watching porn, right? That's how you will naturally let go of it, right? So you have to list down all the benefits that you see in not watching porn, whether it's more drive and hunger, more energy, more confidence, more focus, whatever. Like, now you don't have to write the general benefits, but you just have to write the things that matter to you. Like for me, the thing that mattered, the benefits that mattered to me was the drive and hunger, right? Because the drive and hunger was so important for me that I like just alone the drive and hunger was alone enough for me to just stop masturbating right away, just stop masturbating and watching porn, because I really wanted that drive and hunger every single day. I really loved that, right? So you have to write the things that matters to you, right? List down all those benefits of not watching porn, and you have to see less value in watching porn and way more value in not watching porn. So list down all the benefits right now that you've seen not watching porn, right? And write the things that matter to you. For me, the drive and hunger was the most important thing, and that what made me to just stop masturbating, right? Because I love drive and hunger. I love that feeling every single day, right? So write the things that matter to you and see way more value in not watching porn as compared to watching porn. That's that's how that's, and it's really easy to let go of it, okay? And if you guys like, if this video helped you guys, make sure to smash that like button, share this video as much as possible with your friends so that more people can benefit from it. And if you guys want to join my one-on-one coaching and quit porn and masturbation forever in less than a week, if you want to apply for the one-on-one coaching, link in the description down below. Take care. I'm out.